Well, last week, men who purchase women's bodies for their own sexual gratification came within one vote in the South Australian Parliament from becoming criminals, and that would have been a good thing for reasons we'll explain in just a moment. The bill was introduced by Liberal Upper House MP Nicola Centofanti.
The fundamental innovation of this model is that it targets demand. The model recognises that it is the demand for sexual services that promotes the expansion of sex trade and sex trafficking. The model proceeds from an understanding of prostitution as gendered violence, which creates a very different framework than those that identify prostitution as either labour or work.
Well, the model that Nicola Centofanti is talking about there in that speech to Parliament is what's known as the Nordic model, or now the equality model. Nicola Centofanti joins me from Adelaide. Nicola, thanks so much for being with us. I just want to say congratulations for getting this bill to the floor of the Parliament. Many have been advocating for this for decades in this country. Tell us what happened last week and why you're so passionate about trying to help women through this legislation.
Thanks for having me, Lyle. And look, whilst I was incredibly disappointed that we lost that vote on the floor by just one vote, I'm also heartened. I'm really heartened by how close that voice was. And I think it really speaks to the merit of this bill, the fact that, and it's my understanding, this is the first time this bill has been introduced into a parliament anywhere in Australia, let alone South Australia. It's the first time in South Australia, but my understanding is it's the first time anywhere in the nation. And to have got so close, the first time that this bill has been debated in our country, I think is really heartening. And Lyle, you know, my bill really speaks to the heart and the core of women's equality. My bill seeks to decriminalise the selling of sex, to enable those people that want to leave that industry, meaning that they can do so without fear of conviction and with support services. And we know that more than 95% of people in prostitution are women. And so for me, this is really about women's equality. My bill also seeks to criminalise the buyer. And we know that the majority of buyers are men. And it seeks to criminalise the buyers unashamedly so, and to target demand. It also seeks to criminalise pimps. It also seeks to criminalise brothels and third-party profiteering, which is consistent with the current South Australian law. But Lyle, the provision in my bill that I'm most proud of is around exit strategies, and the government basically providing exit strategies for these women in prostitution who want to exit, because we know that the vast majority of women who enter prostitution do not do so by choice. They do so by circumstance, whether that be poverty, whether that be domestic violence, whether that be coercion, drug and alcohol addiction. There are many reasons why women enter the prostitution industry. And I've spoken to so many women who have left the industry that have said to me it was incredibly difficult, and they only could do it through, you know, support services and not-for-profit organisations who helped them along the way. And being able to provide those support services for these women without fear, and again, this is the most critical part, without fear of being prosecuted or having a conviction, and be able to get on with life.
No, and that's the really key aspect of this legislation, which people who perhaps haven't followed this debate may not be aware. As you mentioned, this decriminalises the act of prostitution, so the law doesn't go after women who, as you say, on the most part are not there by choice. They're there because of circumstances that are out of their control. But it criminalises the buyer, which, as you say, in 95% of instances is the male. Now this has been successful in the Nordic countries for decades. You've made history by getting it to the floor of an Australian Parliament. What do you think it will take to win over that one vote and to truly make history by getting this established in at least one of our states of this country? Because the states, of course, are responsible for prostitution law.
Well, look, Lyle, something that's been brought to my attention throughout this process and speaking to my colleagues is that they saw the merit particularly in those exit strategies. And so, Lyle, that's something that I'm currently working on at the moment. I'm currently drafting a bill that really focuses around simply exit strategies, and it focuses around immunity and spent convictions. So I'll be looking to bring that bill to the Parliament, and I'm hoping to be able to convince my colleagues, and I think I will be able to convince them that actually, whether you agree with the model, the fact that we can have a situation where women can be supported to exit the industry if they wish to do so is absolutely critical. And I know that there are a certain percentage of women who are in the industry by choice, and that is their choice. But as I said previously, we know that there is the vast majority of women do not enter this industry by choice. Yep. And so I think if I'm successful with this exit strategy bill, I think we are always going to be continuously striving to be one step closer to the equality model. We know that it works. You know, you look to countries like Sweden, like France, where this model has been in place now for quite a number of years, decades in some of these countries. And it works because it targets the demand and it reduces the drive for sex trafficking. Yeah. And what's also critically important as well, it changes the culture. And right. I think, you know, right now, that is absolutely critical. I mean, the federal government came out last week and announced $925 million for the Leaving Violence program. And what I'd really love to see is part of that program, an exit strategy for women wanting to leave the prostitution industry. But of course, we can't get that unless we decriminalise it for the women so that they are not fearful of conviction and they can reach out and ask for help.
No, that's right. I mean, we're having this national conversation about violence against women and obviously the tragic murder of far too many women, often at the hands of men. You used the phrase gendered violence when you introduced your bill. I've spoken to many women who've been involved in prostitution, who've worked in legal brothels and supposedly safe regulatory regimes. They say this is violence against women. There's no way to make it safe. Yet the irony is most of our state governments and our politicians are saying, let's decriminalise, let's treat it like serving fries at McDonald's, which of course it's not. And yet on the one hand, we're trying to stop men having looking at women in a dehumanising way, which is, of course, what pornography and prostitution does. So there's some real cognitive dissonance in our society, in our national debate, isn't there?
Oh, look, absolutely. And I'm of a firm view, Lyle, that we cannot have a serious conversation about gender-based violence without talking about a culture that essentially allows women and girls to be viewed as commodities. So I think it's really, really important that when we have a conversation around gender-based violence, around domestic violence, we have to also include the prostitution industry.
So, Nicola, the great irony of politics last week in this nation was in the South Australian Parliament, you were debating the equality model, the Nordic model, criminalising men who exploit women. And yet in Queensland, the Parliament there, Labor and the Greens, passed a bill to completely decriminalise prostitution, something they said would never happen. 20 years ago, I was in Queensland at the time when the then Labor Premier Peter Beattie legalised small boutique brothels, said we'll just tightly regulate it, we'll never fully decriminalise it. Of course, fast forward, the sex trade has got exactly what they've always wanted, complete decriminalisation. So very ironic there, yet in South Australia, you're within a whisker of legislating a model which would actually help women. What do you make of that?
Yeah, Lyle, I mean, it's frustrating to see what's happened up there in Queensland. I think from my point of view, I'm going to continue to keep pushing South Australia to be the leading state when it comes to prostitution reform. I think, South Australia boasts a remarkable history, really, when it comes to gender equality, being the first place in history where women were able to vote and where women were able to stand for Parliament. And I want to continue that work by championing a model that I believe really speaks to the heart of gender equality. And I think, when it comes to decriminalisation, we know that decriminalisation doesn't work. You only have to look over to New Zealand and see the boom of the sex trafficking over in New Zealand. And back in 2015, of course, we have had decriminalisation of prostitution in New South Wales since 1995, and in 2015 there was a parliamentary inquiry that found that there were underground brothels working everywhere, and what's worse is Safe Work New South Wales, who the agency tasked to ensure that women are safe, found it difficult to enter brothels because of the inherent violent nature of the industry.
That's right.
We know that decriminalisation doesn't work. Unfortunately,
failed.
the sex industry it does, and the sex industry. We know the reasons why they push it. But what I can say is that for those women that have been able to exit the industry, tell me that is not the model that helps them.
No, that's exactly right. And look, while ever this sort of myth that, the pretty woman, happy hooker sort of myth that too many of our parliamentarians believe, they need to get a reality check. But Nicola, thanks for what you're doing. You've made massive progress, and I do think it's only a matter of time before you can get that one vote. And as you say, make history. And what better place than South Australia, where women were first given the vote, to criminalise men who exploit women this way. Nicola Centofanti, thank you so much for your time today, and keep up the fight.
Thanks, Lyle. Thanks for having me.